Welcome to another episode of Cheers to Careers. I'm Steve Ridinghouse, the current outreach coordinator at the Chase School here at the University of Kansas. Fortunate enough today to be joined by Sophia Templin, class of 2017. She's an associate director at Finsbury, Glover, and Herring in New York. Welcome, Sophia.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So in your role as an associate director, what do you do at FGH?
Yeah, so I guess to start, FGH, Finsbury Glover Herring, as you mentioned, is a strategic communications firm. So we work with several different Fortune 500 companies, startups, individuals at times to help them with their internal and external communications. So that's everything from press releases to media relations, profile building, thought leadership, etc. So as an associate director, I'm mid-level at the firm, and so I help manage teams and also deal with client relations. So that's kind of making sure that everything gets done on the day-to-day, and also doing my own fair share of drafting communications and making sure that everything's executed.
And I think I saw on your LinkedIn profile, you talked about helping with some high-profile situations. Are you able to share some of that work you've done?
Yeah, so the best way to describe FGH when, like, to my grandpa, for example, is to say that we are a crisis PR firm. So if you've ever seen the show Scandal, it's like that, but for companies. It's kind of like how we describe it in a quick way. But I primarily focus on financial work. So that's typically mergers and acquisitions, any kind of financial restructuring, private equity, venture capital, and those kinds of fundraising sort of projects. So we are essentially an extension of an internal communications firm. So if the University of Kansas, for example, has a communications firm, and that communications group team, and that team is in charge of communicating with all employees, external, like alumni, media, etc. If something really unique happens and that internal team cannot handle whatever is being thrown at them, they would hire a company like mine. And so we would be kind of tasked with helping kind of come in as an extension of that existing team and making sure that the special situation, we've probably done it or seen something similar to it in the past, we can use those past experiences and various other projects that we've kind of worked on and historically to inform our strategic guidance for KU. So it's kind of just special situations in the sense of like things that are not typical. So for example, I helped support the J. Crew bankruptcy in 2021 or 2020, I guess, during the pandemic. It was the first major retail bankruptcy during COVID. We did a lot with COVID and a lot with Black Lives Matter movement, just being that that's something that typical communications teams internal at companies are not something that they're well versed in or something that they've never dealt with before. So they're looking for additional help there. And then I've also worked on the Viacom and CBS merger in 2019. So I've gotten to kind of, I never thought I was going to be doing financial work as a KU J School grad, but the business minor definitely kind of came in to help there.
So was it the business minor that helped you kind of with that financial communication, or is it a lot learn as you go?
It is a lot of learn as you go, for sure. I studied journalism stratcom, obviously, but then I had a business minor and a sociology minor. And as helpful as the business minor probably could have been, I don't think that is what I focus my time in. And I really, at the end of the day, had to kind of relearn a lot of this stuff. What's really cool about like working in a company like this is you quickly learn that nobody really knows like there's no proper solutions. There's no cookie cutter solution to every kind of situation that we're faced with. So a lot of it is looking at what kind of comparable examples we have of other companies that have dealt with like this kind of issue before. How did they message it? What kind of key things in media pick up on? How did they shape their press release? Who talked? Was the CEO doing press? And really using examples to kind of drive our guidance. And then it's a lot of investopedia.com. So figuring out what a go shop is, or what the fundraise requirements are, or I'm an expert on SPACs. And I never thought, if you had asked me 7 years ago, if I ever thought I would be touching anything within SPAC world or, honestly, like Bitcoin or NFTs, any of that stuff, I would have preferred to not touch it with a 10-foot pole. And that's very much what I do now. So it's kind of just figuring it out as you go. And being a sponge is very much required in this role.
Sophia, I believe you had an internship with Finsbury before you graduated. And didn't you also have another one with another organization, Mullen Lowe?
Yes. Yeah. I interned with an advertising agency, Mullen Lowe Profero, before I interned with Finsbury. So both were in New York, very different experiences. The first one was very true advertising. I was on the strategy team and did a lot of typical kind of client work where I was helping advise on social strategy or things that I feel like we really focused on at the J School, things that I had done before and knew what was going on. And then I decided I wanted to make sure that I really wanted to do advertising. So I wanted to see the PR side of things too, and dip my toe there. And through that advertising internship, I actually had a connection who connected me to someone who connected me to someone where I ended up getting my foot in the door at Finsbury. And I had no idea what I was doing. It was completely opposite, very corporate, just a complete different work environment where the advertising agency was super fun and very much, I use this example a lot when I help hire folks for Finsbury. And I use this example a lot is that with advertising, you are trying to sell the Oreo to get more people to buy Oreos. And Oreo doesn't really need you to help with their sales, but it's great. And it's so helpful. And for PR, if Oreo were to hire us, it would probably be Oreo's parent company that would hire us. And it's because Oreo is going through a recall or a crisis or something that they really need the support on. And so with that comes just a different mindset. It's significantly more intense. It's very much rooted in the financials. So it's because Oreo's hemorrhaging money that they're hiring us, which it causes us to kind of think through it in a different way than thinking about positioning Oreo differently. So there's a lot of definitely different, like lots of different ways that we could look at the two different agencies. But I think that because I had that first experience, I definitely have more well-rounded perspective in my current role.
Now, was that always a dream for you? I mean, DeSoto to New York, that's a pretty big leap from DeSoto, Kansas, right?
It's a big leap. DeSoto, Kansas has one stoplight. So yes, it was a huge, I think a lot of my family and friends still are like, are you sure that's where you want to be? It wasn't always like where I wanted to be. It's amazing. Now I've been here for 5 years. And I don't really see myself moving anytime soon. I've dabbled with the idea, but I think I love living here and I love New York. I first came to New York with through this kind of like an externship opportunity that I got through Girl Scouts in like 2010 or 2011. So I was really young and but that was kind of the first trip that I had made here. And I was like, wow, this place is really cool. I can't imagine ever living here, but this place is really neat. And I came again for a theater trip in high school. And I think when I got the first internship, it was through a family connection that I got an intro to someone at this firm. And it was such a happenstance kind of like internship. There wasn't a formal application. It was kind of like they just grilled me on the phone for an hour and I talked to a couple people and it ended up being, a couple months later and one of the guys that I talked to, he's like, so are you interning here or not? And I had to kind of check myself that here was actually New York City, and ended up moving to New York for the summer. My parents drove me out and I lived in NYU dorms for 3 months as a 19-year-old and had no idea what I was doing. I had to navigate the subway and I think the next summer, I wasn't sure it was going to be New York again, but I was just kind of looking for something different, found the different thing, happened to be in New York. And so we did it again. And that time my parents let me fly. They didn't make me do the Midwest car trip again. But yeah, I think when I was looking for a job, I wasn't sure if Finsbury was the right place for me just yet. I think you only get a taste of 3 months, and I had really no idea what it was. So different from my past experiences that I wasn't sure that that was the right move for me. So when I was looking for a job, it wasn't just New York, it was all over. I looked at every company I possibly could, applied to every company I possibly could, and they were kind of, it was Kansas City, Chicago, San Francisco, definitely New York, because I had a lot of connections there from the past internships. But it just kind of ended up working out, and I graduated and moved to New York within the week. So.
Wow. And can you talk a little bit about your time at KU? I know you're involved in a lot of activities. I mean, I know softball took a lot of your time. I think you're in student senate and also the student athlete advisory committee.
Mm-hmm.
How did you develop those time management skills?
Yeah, I don't know. I think about that a lot, because it's like now I think I would just be so exhausted. But so I played softball at KU. It's kind of a weird story. I played competitive ball all the way throughout middle school, high school, and then when the college recruiting time comes along, and I looked everywhere for different schools, but it was always about which school had a newspaper. Actually, I was editor in chief of my high school newspaper, and I was, that was always my passion, was writing, and I wanted a journalism degree. And when I went to I went to a few different schools that ended up offering me opportunities to play softball there, great schools, but it came down to, okay, this school only has an English degree, or this school only has, they have this thing, but they don't have this thing. And it just wasn't the right fit for me. And I feel very fortunate that I had a coach, but also parents who encouraged me to, like, it wasn't always about softball for me, and everyone saw that. And so it was like, you have to go where you want to go to school. And both my parents went to KU. I grew up in DeSoto, Kansas, which is 25 minutes away. And I decided I was just not going to play softball in college. I was just going to go to J school and join a sorority and do that whole thing at KU. And I think within 48 hours, I had a phone call from the KU softball head coach, my junior year of high school. So I ended up committing, because it was like everything I wanted. I wanted to be part of the Kansan. I wanted to go to the J school. I wanted to join a sorority. I wanted to do student senate. Both my parents did. And it was also great that my parents could come to every game. So it was everything serendipitously zipped up. And yeah, I was really fortunate to play for 4 years at KU, it was such a dream growing up playing, like going to, camps at KU for softball and whatnot. So, and I think I just wanted to milk it for everything I could. It started off tentatively. I didn't do too much that first year. I wrote for the Kansan on the features kind of group, and it was really just at my own discretion what I had time for. And I ended up getting roped into a Senate committee, or Senate campaign at the end of my freshman year, where I was so open with them. I don't have time. It's during season. I'm gone all the time. And I'm writing for the Kansan, and it ended up just kind of being something I really loved doing. And I ended up kind of being able to blend all of the different things into one. So as crazy as it seems to list all those items out, they were very cohesive in a lot of ways, where I ended up advocating really heavily for athletics on student senate, and vice versa. I think a lot of my roles within student government at KU ended up blending into a lot of the role that I took on within student athlete advisory committee, just because you're a bridge in a lot of ways, where I think sometimes athletes get really siloed and the rest of the student body is very siloed. And then I did end up joining a sorority my sophomore year too. So I was able to kind of get to see all of the pieces and to kind of create my own experience.
And I know you talked about your interest in newspapers and working for the Kansan. When did you kind of make that transition to strategic communication? Because I think a lot of our students, when they arrive, they don't know what strategic communication is.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely did not. I knew that there was the two different routes, news and info and stratcom, right? And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do at the end of college. Just like probably most folks. I thought I wanted to go to law school. I ended up actually taking the LSAT my senior year for that purpose. I think when I fully made the move, so I loved writing, I loved contributing to the Kansan, and I wasn't able to do that as much or in the capacity that I really wanted to, because I was taking on a lot of different interests, and also softball is just such a huge time commitment that I wasn't able to like really be a part of a group. I'm sure that they would have totally welcomed me to do that on my own terms, but it wasn't fitting for me. And I was finding different kind of avenues to stretch. So when I did, probably I stopped writing around my sophomore year. I was playing a bigger role on the team. I had joined that sorority, like I mentioned. And I think that was when you kind of start taking more of the stratcom classes. Like I knew I was studying stratcom when I came into the J school, but I think it wasn't totally clear to me until probably media writing, or like I think, gosh, I can't remember the name of the class, but it was with Carrie Benson. I just loved it. It was, do you remember what's the name of that class that she teaches?
Is it Media and Society or Message Development?
It might be message development, honestly. It was a very challenging class where she just critiqued our writing so openly. And I mean, it was such a cool experience. I was like, this is exactly what I want. I want someone to be, vigorous and reviewing my work, and also like helping me become a better writer and challenging me to be better. And I have so much respect for her. And I think that class definitely solidified that for me. I think I took a proofing class that I loved as well. And because it kind of blended, it was a news and info proofing class that made me just so much. Without that, I think that class is probably the one I use the most in my job today, because it's so much of my whole career lives and dies on words and little words. And so I think that was definitely influential. But yeah, I think it was probably just taking more classes in the J school and like realizing, I didn't want to write for a newspaper for the rest of my life. I knew that I thought I wanted to go to law school. And I liked the idea of changing words to tell the story that you want to tell. And I had always enjoyed that. And so it's kind of just meshing all those worlds into one. And then I think as you go deeper into the stratcom route, I mean, the agency was established when I was at KU. I did the advertising classes, and I think that in combination with my internship, it just kind of became clear to me that really wasn't where my passions lied. I wanted to do something that had a little bit more of a worldly like impact, I guess, which is why I thought that the law school path was like the trade I really wanted to get on. And then my dad's a lawyer, and he encouraged me to work for a couple years after school before I did that. Before I decided to practice law, or before I decided to go to law school, because he wishes that he had done that. And with that, I think I quickly learned that I actually really love this path that I'm in. I work with lawyers all the time, and I mean, selfishly, I feel like I get to do more of the creative piece. I think he would hate that I say that, but so much of my job is like crafting what we want to say, and we tailor it to all the different stakeholder groups. And so the message development classes help so much, and being able to put on the different hats for the different. I think that that's something else that I really am so appreciative of, being able to do all those different things at KU. Is like I was able to put on my student athlete hat, and I was able to put on my student government hat, and like kind of being able to communicate and I like vibe with the different groups is kind of a skill that I was able to transpose into later in life.
Okay. And I know you mentioned a couple classes and Carrie Benson. Were there other mentors, staff members along the way that really helped you during your time at KU?
Yeah, I mean, the careers group, for sure. I think with planning all my extracurriculars, but then also I had these internships and I really wanted to make sure that I still graduated on time. And I think that was incredibly helpful. And using that resource was like a saving grace in so many ways. It was so helpful to be able to kind of plot out the things that I was interested in and make time for some of more news and info classes that didn't fall into the StratCom route that I was able to take. I think, yeah, Carrie was she definitely kind of turned me on to what life could be like beyond the J school in terms of like what is out there for strategic thinking and communicating. And then, yeah, the proofing class was very helpful. And I'm so sorry. I don't remember who the professor for that class was, but I think it was McLennan. Or was it?
McLennan?
Yes, McLennan. Yeah. I hope you can edit that, but yeah.
And I know last fall, I think your company went with a merger. Did that affect your role in any capacity, or did you just kind of keep going on?
Yeah, so we just kept going on. So we are currently, my company, and I know I mentioned this at the beginning, Steve, but my company merged when I joined, we were about 75 people in New York. That was in 2017. So since then, we have at least tripled in size. We're over 300 probably. I don't even know the new number in New York City, just given working from home. But we have changed offices. Our capabilities are different, and we are absolutely the number one strategic communications agency that's out there. Given the size, we've merged with a company called Glover Park Group, which is out of DC. They do a lot of policy, regulatory, lobbying, government relations kind of work. They still do plenty of strategic communications for corporate side, but it's a lot more focused on DC area and policy thinking. And so that group merged with us in 2021, and we changed our name to Finsbury Glover Herring. And then this last year, we also merged with a company called Sard Verbennen and Company, and SVC is very focused in financial activism, M&A. That's their bread and butter. And so having both of those and us under one roof, whereas we were kind of more general, stretched a bit on all of those things before, it's really impressive. Every year there's something that they put out called the league tables, which is like where they rank PR firms based on the deals, the transactions that they help advise companies on. They rank it by deal value. So like if this transaction was $6 billion, how many of those deals added all up by dollar. And then they also do it on deal count, which is for however many we had for the year. And this last year we were number one in both, which is huge. And that's ranking across all of the peer companies, strategic communication firms globally.
And it's hard to believe, but I think we're about 2 weeks away from the pandemic really shutting things down. What have the 2 years been like for you? I mean, it looks like you're working from home.
Yeah.
Have you been able to be pretty consistent with your workflow?
Yeah, we were so lucky. We adopted Teams, Microsoft Teams, like right before the pandemic. And so people had been already kind of comfortable using that. Early adopting with Zoom. It's definitely changed the world for sure. And working from home is going to be forever, I think, kind of like a new option forever, it seems like, is at least my perspective. Working from home today, we do have an office that's open. We actually just got a new go back date, but this is like the 5th go back date I feel like we've had. Right now that's slated for the first week of April. But I think the biggest things have been, the biggest challenge probably from my perspective was the early days. New York was really intense, as I'm sure you know, with the pandemic, and it was a really scary place to be, but the work was so, we had so much work there. Being a crisis PR firm, there was a lot to do. It was, the market was crashing and no one knew how to advise anybody. But we were getting, we were retained by several different major companies who needed to speak to their employees immediately and give them some sort of solace or guidance. We worked with a major grocery chain at the time that was shutting down constantly. We worked with major food producers that were having supply chain issues. It was as a, how old was I? 25, 24? No, yeah, as a 24-year-old living in New York, being by myself a little bit and having to not only deal with this from a personal, like, am I okay standpoint, to also like, I need to write this employee memo that's telling them about a fellow worker who died on the food packing line. It was a lot, and I think it was very overwhelming. And I do feel like there's a joke that you don't get your New Yorker card until it's 10 years or a natural disaster, and I feel like that expedited it significantly in the New York thing, but then also like with my job. I feel like there's very little that could get thrown at my way that I wouldn't know how to, kind of deal with it. But it was a lot at first. It's definitely settled for sure. There's been, a lot of crazy stuff happening in the financial markets of the last year and a half. We're still kind of dealing with it. It does feel like we're probably going to bust again. But at this point, I'm not even scared. I feel like it was a lot at once. And it was totally a baptism of fire right at the beginning. But yeah, this is definitely, it definitely feels prolonged. We're still dealing with COVID communications and back to work communications. And that's the coolest thing about this job, though, I will say, is that my entire day is dependent on what's happening. And it keeps that news and info piece of me and that, the reporter piece of me that I wanted so desperately alive, because I get to see every single thing that we are advising clients in step with what's happening in the world at all times, which is really cool.
Before I forget, does FGH have a softball team, and are you the pitcher for that team, or are your softball days over?
Softball days are over. Sadly, FGH does not have a softball team. I heard that our new company that we're merging with, SBC, does have a team, so maybe. But yeah, I love softball. I loved playing. So grateful for that experience. But right now, I used to coach a 12 and under team in Brooklyn before the pandemic. I hope I can get back to that. I still love giving pitching lessons in Central Park sometimes, but yeah, sadly, those days are a little bit over. I think my arm would probably fall off.
And before I let you go, we're about a couple months away from graduation. Any advice for the class of 2022?
Gosh. So much advice. I think if anything, the last couple of years have taught me, it's just to roll with the punches and, trust that it's going to work out. And there's a lot, go make a list of every single place you think you could possibly work, or that is possibly interesting to you, and look at their communications teams, and things that you may not think are your cup of tea could end up being, the best thing that's ever happened to you. I think for me, like, Finsbury was definitely not where I thought I was going to be. And I'm so glad that I ended up, I did the whole interview process for several different companies and really spent my time doing the due diligence to really look at those different companies and talk to a lot of people and get advice from everybody I possibly could. And had it not been for that, I don't know if I would have ended up in the same spot. And I'm so thankful that I did, because doing the diligence and doing, researching everything I could and stalking every single person I know on LinkedIn, I think that ended up getting me to a place where I've been at the same company for 5 years and I'm continuously learning. I'm very happy in my role, and I get to do a lot of really cool work. And I hope that happens for all of our graduates as well. And I think KU, especially the J School, was something that really made me ready for that. And I don't think looking for a job that's going to directly translate the skills that you have in school to what you're going to do in real life is kind of an impossible Easter egg task. And so being able to take the best things that you learn and really applying them to, different capacities, and just being eager to learn and rolling with the punches is kind of the only thing you can do, really.
Well, Sophia, again, I appreciate your time all the way from New York. We always love connecting with our Jayhawks nationwide. And I don't know if you got a KU Cup close by. I always like to give a little cheer start. Oh, nice. I think I got one of those at home. Again, Sophia, I appreciate it. And cheers to your career at Finsbury. Rock Chalk. Thanks.
Rock Chalk.